Today we're going to talk about something that I think affects almost all of us, burnout. We're going to look at a framework called Somatic Transduction, which makes a pretty radical argument. Maybe that feeling of being completely wiped out isn't actually your fault.
Let's just start with something I think we can all agree on. So many of our modern systems, at work, with our technology, in our communities, they just feel broken, right?
And this isn't just some vague feeling we have. You can see the symptoms everywhere. I mean, people are chronically burned out. Organizations feel totally fragmented and disconnected. The technology that's supposed to help us just creates more noise than actual useful signal. And maybe the biggest tell, our systems seem to be gobbling up more and more energy just to get less and less done. Sound familiar?
So this all boils down to one huge question. Is all of this a failure of people? A lack of grit or willpower or resilience? Or is it something way deeper? Is it actually a failure in the design of the systems themselves?
Okay, so our first stop here is to reframe this whole idea of failure. We're going to try to move away from blaming ourselves and start looking at this as a problem of system architecture.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because you've got two totally different ways of looking at the same problem. The common view, the one we hear all the time, says burnout is a psychological problem, a moral failing even, or just some kind of individual weakness. But the structural view says, no, it's an architectural problem. It's caused by something called open-loop design. And don't worry, we'll get to that, which basically just shoves all the mess and disorder outward.
And that disorder brings us to the real culprit, the one that's kind of hiding in plain sight, entropy. So let's talk about what that really means here, because it's all about this idea of unprocessed system disorder.
Now don't worry, this isn't going to be some heavy physics class. For our purposes, just think of entropy as a simple word for all the messy byproducts a system creates. It's the disorder, the stress, the waste, the uncertainty, all the gunk that gets generated when work is being done.
Let me give you a super simple example. Imagine a factory. It's an industrial system, right? It takes in resources like raw materials and electricity, and it creates a product. Super straightforward.
But here's the thing, that factory also creates waste. It puts out heat, pollution, noise. In engineering, that's called entropy leakage. Now in the human systems we work in, that waste isn't smoke. It's stress. It's burnout. It's a million tiny errors piling up. And guess who ends up absorbing all that leakage? We do.
And this next quote just nails it. I want you to really let this sink in. Human distress is not a failure of will. It is a signal of unprocessed system disorder. In other words, your burnout isn't a you problem. It's like the check engine light on your car's dashboard, screaming that the system is broken and leaking chaos everywhere.
So if we're the ones absorbing all this unprocessed junk, what does that make us? Well, this leads to a completely new and, frankly, much more powerful way to think about our role. We need a new model, the human as a transducer.
So what the heck is a transducer? It's actually super simple. It's just something that converts energy from one form to another. A microphone is a perfect example. It takes in the messy energy of sound waves and it converts them, it processes them into clean electrical signals.
So let's apply that. The old way of thinking about people in a system sees us as passive endpoints, or maybe just a little node that makes a decision, or, let's be honest, an expendable resource. But this new model, it flips the script completely. It says we are active transducers. We're biological processors whose job is to literally stabilize the entire system around us.
Okay, so if we're these active transducers, how does that actually work? I mean, what's happening inside of us? Well, this is where a really cool concept from the source material comes in called the blue loop. It's basically the biological process our bodies use to turn disorder into order.
All right, let's walk through it. It's a four-step process. First, you get the input. That's all the high entropy stuff flying at you. Stress, uncertainty, a fire hose of information. Second, your body begins to process it through what's called somatic regulation. That's just a fancy way of saying your physical body, your nervous system, your breath, your posture starts working automatically to manage that chaos. Third, if that works, you get a clean output, structured, focused action. Things like good coordination, stability, and just doing purposeful work. And finally, and this is the magic part, you get feedback. Your structured actions actually reduce the chaos in the system, which closes the loop.
So to put it really simply, when your blue loop is working properly, you are a machine that turns chaos into stability. But when that loop gets broken or just totally overloaded, all that entropy just leaks out. And that is what we experience as burnout and dysfunction.
And this all leads us to the big solution,
the main takeaway here. The answer isn't to just try harder or to have more willpower and control. The answer is architectural. It's about building better loops.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. You can actually see the difference. For an individual, a broken or open loop shows up as slow recovery from stress. Scientists can even measure this as low heart rate variability, or HRV. But a healthy closed loop means you bounce back fast. You have high HRV. Now zoom out to a task. A broken loop means errors pile up and you're under pressure. A healthy loop means your performance stays stable. And for a whole organization, it's the difference between constant burnout and a stable, resilient workforce.
Which brings us right back to the core message of this whole framework. The solution is not about gripping the steering wheel tighter and trying to control everything harder. It is about designing better loops for ourselves, for our teams, and for the tools we use.
So I'll just leave you with this to think about. Take a look at your own life, your own work. Where are the open loops? Where is that unprocessed stress and chaos leaking out? And what's maybe one small thing you could do, starting today, to help close just one of them?